here. So, Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Pai, as you know, accelerating broadband development in rural areas is a priority for many members on both sides of the dais. I've worked closely with you and the Commission to ensure that the agency's data collection methods regarding mobile broadband coverage are standardized. Standardized data is necessary to ensure that funds used to expand broadband deployment are targeted to truly underserved and unserved communities in rural America and in my state of Mississippi. Would you agree that standardizing data collection is important to target funds accurately to deploy the broadband in underserved and unserved areas? And will you commit to ensuring that the baseline coverage data collected from carriers for the Mobility Fund Phase 2 challenge process be standardized? And please discuss how the draft order circulated last week on the Mobility Fund challenge process achieves that objective.
Thank you, Senator. And this is one of the reasons why we broke with longstanding practice in my second week in office and instituted a policy of publishing every single proposal and order that the FCC was considering at least 3 weeks in advance. Nowhere is the thicket more complicated than this one. We want to make sure that we get it right for Americans' wireless consumers, and that requires us getting the data right. And so last week, as you pointed out, we published the proposal that we're going to be voting on August 3rd to ensure that this data is accurate. And I understand that standardized data collection is one of the issues that has been flagged. We would love to work with you and your staff, any interested stakeholders, frankly, to make sure that on August 3rd, we ensure that we have a process that makes the input accurate so that the output can be worthy.
Will this be a one-time data collection?
With respect to Mobility Fund Phase 2, currently that is our expectation, but obviously we are always open to suggestions on ways to improve our overall data collection or to broaden this one if necessary.
Well, I'd like to mention to all three of you then that there is a serious question as to how the Mobility Fund Challenge process will ensure that recipients of the funds are meeting build-out commitments over the 10-year period. Would you like to comment on that?
I'd be happy to, Senator. Every dollar that is spent by the FCC that is ultimately collected from the taxpayers has to be deployed. It cannot be simply poured down the drain, and that requires build-out. And so we have instituted aggressive reporting obligations and build-out obligations as well to ensure that that money actually goes to building out 4G LTE in unserved parts of the country. We do not want that money to be wasted. America's wireless consumers simply don't have time to wait.
Let's have a further discussion on that with members of the Commission. While the draft order specifies that cell edge probability and the cell loading factor will be used by carriers when creating rural coverage maps, some people remain concerned that additional factors such as the assumed signal strength also need to be standardized or disclosed in order for the data you receive to be reliable. Will you commit to working with me and those stakeholders to address these concerns before the order is finalized?
I would be happy to, Senator.
Thank you, and I look forward to you briefing me and my staff on about your efforts in this regard.
Thank you.
Now let's talk about the federal permitting process. And I'll go back to you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the FCC is working on a proceeding to modernize the Commission's approach to the National Environmental Protection Act and the National Historic Protection Act to accelerate the deployment of wireless infrastructure. There are many onerous rules in place today that prevent or delay deployment, including the implementation of antenna sites that are critical to wireless network build-out. Please discuss how an update to the Commission's approach towards environmental and historic reviews may accelerate the deployment of mobile broadband and the proliferation of 5G networks to both urban and rural areas, particularly in existing public right-of-ways that have already undergone environmental and historic reviews where broadband infrastructure has already been deployed. And do you think Congress needs to act on this issue?
All great points. Obviously, the regulatory review, including environmental and historic preservation review that applied traditionally to 100-foot cell towers, may not be as relevant when you're talking about a small cell that could be as small as a pizza box or that you could hold in your hand. And so we want to make sure for these less obtrusive, lower power deployments, that we tailor the regulatory burden to the nature of the deployment, as Commissioner Rosenworcel has pointed out. And so that's one of the things we're looking to work with all interested stakeholders on, to figure out what is the appropriate calibration of those rules with respect to small cells and distributed antenna systems and the like. In terms of additional authority, it may be helpful in some cases for Congress to give us that authority with respect to 5G. For example, the FCC's jurisdiction over pole attachments is somewhat circumscribed, and so we'd be happy to work with you, any members of the committee who are interested, to find creative solutions that would help us secure the benefits of the wireless revolution to come.
Mr. Carr, do you think Congress needs to act in this space, or do you have the authority you need?
Senator, thank you for the question. There are certainly some actions the FCC can take in terms of streamlining. Congress's help here would certainly be welcome, whether it's dig once legislation or work with respect to federal lands where the FCC might have more limited authority.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wicker.